Victoria Adelaide. Mary Louisa was born on 21st November 1840 at Buckingham Palace, instantly becoming the centre of her parents' world. The obstetrician reportedly exclaimed in dismay, "Oh, madame, it's a girl!" Quick-witted Queen Victoria replied, "Never mind, next time it will be a prince." Little Victoria, nicknamed Vicky by family, was heir presumptive until her brother Alfred arrived a year later. By January 1841, she was created Princess Royal, a title marking her status as the future of two realms. Just a few months after her birth, Vicky was christened on the 10th of February 1841 in the throne room of Buckingham Palace. A gilded lily font was specially made for the ceremony, and the infant princess was carried by solemn bishops as cousins and courtiers looked on. She was baptised by her regal namesakes, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's mother, Victoria of Saxe-Coburg, and given 4 names to honour family: Victoria Adelaide, Mary Louisa. Little Victoria grew up alongside a bustling brood of siblings. Baby brother Edward arrived in 1841, then Princess Alice in 1843, followed by Alfred, nicknamed Affy, Helena, Louise, Arthur, Leopold, and Beatrice over the next dozen years. The young Princess Royal shared her family's country life at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight and Balmoral Castle in Scotland. There she and her sisters played in the heathered hills and sailed toy boats on the loch, always under the watchful eye of their parents. Although raised in splendour, Vicky's early home was warm. These years also saw her beloved father, Albert, tutoring her in history and the duties of monarchy, while her mother's journal proudly notes Vicky's intelligence and gentle spirit. From her first days, Vicky's family life was full of learning and gentle discipline. Her father sketched out every day's lesson, from geography in the morning to music in the afternoon, and Prince Albert often guided her through tales of kings and parliaments. By age 6, she was quizzed on London geography, and by age 8, she could recite lines from Shakespeare in English and German. The princess adored art and literature. She filled sketchbooks with drawings of Windsor and painted delicate watercolours of flowers and family. One of her proudest achievements as a girl was a large watercolour scene of Romeo and Juliet, which her parents framed as an exhibition of her talent. In letters home, Victoria confessed that "I love art more than I can say," and often escaped with a sketch pad when life became too formal. This love of creation stayed with her for life. She would later fill albums with sketches of Potsdam gardens and interior designs for new palaces. Yet alongside her creativity, she was serious and earnest, taking pride in her nightly reading of history under her governess's lamp. Family lore says Albert once sighed with pride that his little girl was his instrument of freedom for Germany, a hint of the role he hoped she would play one day. Socially and personally, she was equally mature. In Kensington and at Osborne, she began to form her own circle. 2 childhood friends, the daughters of General Sir Charles Grey, were her closest companions, and together they practiced drawing and violin. Vicky also loved the outdoors. She could often be found horseback riding in the Windsor Park under the watchful eyes of coachmen, or pacing gardens with notebooks for new flower designs, a hobby that foreshadowed her later garden wars in Prussia. She was very close to her younger sister Alice. The 2 girls exchanged affectionate letters and tried to outpaint each other, happily giggling over their earliest canvases. The royal family's daily routine grew with her, but Victoria always kept a level head. Courtiers marvelled that she knew when to curtsy and when to cross-question a tutor, all before tea time. As Vicky grew into her teenage years, she knew from her mother that marriage to a European prince was in her future. In July 1851, at age 11, she first met her future husband, Prince Frederick of Prussia, at the Great Exhibition in London. The pair hit it off immediately. Victoria led Frederick through the exhibits of the Crystal Palace, speaking fluent German and French as they admired steam engines and works of art together. Frederick later told his family that he was enchanted by the bright, curious girl who knew as much about world affairs as any adult. Over the next few years, their friendship bloomed into love. When she was 16, Victoria's life took a decisive turn. The young Crown Prince, Frederick of Prussia, arrived at Balmoral in September 1855, and after just 3 days, he nervously presented his proposal. Over champagne and soft Scottish hills, he asked Queen Victoria and Prince Albert for her hand in marriage. The Queen could hardly refuse her beloved daughter, and gave consent on the condition that the wedding wait until Vicky turned 17. The couple's engagement was officially announced on 17 May 1856. The British press had mixed feelings. Some welcomed a lasting alliance, but others grumbled that the Hohenzollern dynasty was a miserable one, noting Prussia's lackluster support for England in the recent Crimean War. Conservative voices in Germany likewise whispered dismay at a British bride. Still, liberals on both sides cheered, hoping that Vicky would bring England's progressive spirit to reform the rigid Prussian state. Prince Albert threw himself into the preparations. Between wreathing Vicky's hair and selecting silk gowns, he also tutored her on all things Prussian: maps of Berlin, accounts of the 7 Weeks' War, 1866 yet to come, and essays on constitution and the King's Council. One of Albert's confidants even imagined Vicky as an instrument for liberalising Germany. Far in Germany, Frederick's family was less enthusiastic. Old King Wilhelm, shy and embittered by strokes, simply smiled and clapped hands in blessing. But his wife, the Empress Augusta, was openly cold. Courtiers whispered that she preferred a Russian match for her mild air rather than an English girl. Nonetheless, the marriage was set. On 25th of January, 1858, a glittering wedding took place at Buckingham Palace. Victoria married Frederick in a ceremony attended by all Europe's royalty and her own extended family. The young bride, white-gowned and nervously composed, promised to bring happiness and respect to her husband. Queen Victoria gave her a rich diamond parure and even planted a long-lost hawthorn bush in the garden as a wedding gift, the original plant under which Victoria and Albert were betrothed. Parliament granted the Princess Royal a £40,000 dowry and an annual allowance to ensure she would never want for support. On that winter evening, the public greeted the newlyweds with cheers and songs. Their love seemed to promise an era of Anglo-Prussian friendship. Life changed radically when Victoria and Frederick set off for Berlin. The court awaited them with rigid formality. Vicky's days were soon filled with official duties rather than drawing-room games. She had to attend dawn receptions, bow to foreign dignitaries, and host banquets by moonlight. Her beloved English idioms earned curious stares. The ladies of the Berlin court had never heard quite used as an affirmative, and some thought her habit of writing personal letters too intimate. Moreover, Queen Victoria had expected her daughter to juggle loyalties. When a French princess's funeral fell during their journey home, Vicky mourned for only 1 week in deference to Prussian etiquette, an act that enraged her mother, who wanted the full British mourning period. In a much-quoted quarrel, the Queen scolded her. "It is useless to make of yourself what you are not." Vicky's letters home show she was torn. She loved England deeply, but wanted to honour Frederick's nation. Nevertheless, the new Princess Royal knew duty. She quickly learned the protocols of Berlin, as well as she had learned English customs. Her father-in-law made a point of giving her and Frederick a home, a shabby wing of the royal palace in Berlin, and Vicky threw herself into restoring it. When it proved impractical, no working bathtub or reliable heat, they moved to the Kronprinzenpalais, a nicer residence on Unter den Linden. She spent hours overseeing the renovation and even dictated plans for a formal English-style drawing room. Friends later noted how she insisted on naming one corner the afternoon tea corner, complete with porcelain china and a small tea trolley from England. In the years after marriage, Victoria and Frederick settled into their role as Crown Princess and Prince of Prussia. Frederick's accession as heir apparent in 1861, upon the death of his uncle, raised Vicky's standing, but not her allowance, a point of early conflict. Wilhelm I, Frederick's stern father, begrudged giving his son more money. He essentially left Vicky to spend down her own dowry. Her father, Prince Albert, complained bitterly to his agent, noting that Prussia had not given one pfennig to the couple and was impoverishing her. She accepted this with characteristic grace, patching palace bills from household accounts, and even selling some of her own jewellery to fund Berlin charity drives. Her position as Crown Princess gave her rare opportunities to advocate her ideals, even in secretive ways. Vicky strongly believed that a monarch's power should be limited by law. When in 1862 King Wilhelm I announced he would govern without parliamentary approval, Frederick quietly opposed the move. He confided in his wife, and her advice was to stand firm for constitutional government, just as British kings had done. Historians say it was Vicky's idea that Frederick threaten abdication if the king refused a compromise. This emergency council wrangle alarmed Bismarck. The Chancellor is said to have called young Frederick as obstinate as Victoria's collar and often bypassed the couple entirely. But parliamentary liberals were thrilled by the royal couple's stance, and the period cemented their reputation as the liberal royals. During the crisis, Vicky privately wrote of William's plan to rule like the Tsar and worried about the growing authoritarian strain in Prussia. She and Frederick even took a brief sea trip in late 1862 to the Mediterranean on the royal yacht, partly to recover from the stress of the political battles back home. Victoria's political influence also appeared in how she embraced progressive ideas. She and Frederick became patrons of science and education. The guest lists at Kronprinzen Palais included not only princes and generals, but professors and businessmen. One startling legacy of her moral courage was how she dealt with the growing anti-Semitism of the era. Conservative radicals like historian Heinrich von Treitschke were spreading hate against Jews. Vicky could not abide it. In one letter, she condemned Treitschke's lectures as lunatic ravings and insisted such bigots belonged in asylums. To make her point, she and her husband actually slipped into the Berlin synagogue during a day of prayer for Jews' emancipation. It was a quiet protest, but word got back to Wilhelm I that the Crown Princess of Prussia was standing up with the Jews against the pretended voice of German nationalism. Queen Victoria was delighted to hear of this gesture. In London, it was written that Vicky had ashamed the bigots with her bravery. Within Prussia, it caused a stir. Some conservative officers, it was said, muttered that the Crown Princess would be the ruin of the empire. Certainly her more reactionary in-laws were uneasy. One famously radical field marshal, Alfred von Waldersee, later spoke of removing Frederick and Vicky by force if Frederick ever dared take the throne. Despite such threats, the Crown Princess and Prince remained popular with the liberal public. They accepted invitations to student gatherings and gave sympathetic smiles to poor Berliners. Frederick once remarked that no one in the palace they met was too lowly to visit if Vicky asked for them. In turn, newspapers often printed letters from grateful citizens, calling Victoria of Prussia the liberal queen. Through all this, she never abandoned her English habits. There were still tea trays behind the throne and chamomile tincture on her bedside table. She kept an album of English wildflowers pressed between palace folios and somehow had a small dog from Windsor accompany her to Potsdam. Her presence at the Hohenzollern court was like a constant reminder of a freer, constitutional world, an influence Bismarck distrusted as much as he longed for her husband's favour. Yet, she bore it all with a kind smile. Courtiers whispered that she treated everyone with a respect they had never felt before. The dawn of 1888 was a bittersweet moment for Victoria. Her father-in-law, Emperor Wilhelm I, was ailing, and her husband Frederick was gravely ill with throat cancer. Doctors in Berlin were confounded, so the young crown princess even brought England's top throat specialist, Sir Morrell Mackenzie, to help, although he only misdiagnosed the illness. Through the winter, Frederick's pain worsened, yet on the 9th of March 1888, he nevertheless became Kaiser Frederick III after his father's death. Victoria of Prussia was now officially the German Empress and Queen of Prussia, albeit for the shortest reign in German history. On the 15th of March, a modest proclamation named her Empress Kaiserin Friedrich, Empress Frederick, using her husband's name in the German style. She stood by his side in the courtyard of the New Berlin Palace, receiving the acclamations of the army in the chilly spring air. For 99 days she wore the crown, and in those few weeks she tried to push Frederick's liberal agenda. Private diaries record that Empress and Emperor discussed reform, expanding schools, healing the Kulturkampf wounds with the Catholic Church, even gently curbing the army's dominance. There was talk of freeing some political prisoners and allowing more freedom of association. But Frederick's illness got worse by the day, leaving no time for a grand liberal revolution. Her public appearances were limited to bed in Wiesbaden and Potsdam, as doctors tended to Frederick in a feverish hope. Wilhelm II, her son, was caught in a delicate position. He too waited to ascend, so he could only watch the slow passing of his father and the woman he called Mama Fritz. When Kaiser Frederick died on the 9th of June 1888, a saddened Victoria had to step into life alone. The pomp of empire was already moving on. In a private ceremony, Frederick had decreed that his wife be allowed to retire to Kronberg Castle in the Taunus Hills, to mourn in peace. Shortly after, that castle was expanded into Schloss Friedrichshof, a grand memorial to her late husband. She poured her energies into its construction, seeing in each stone and tower a tribute to the emperor she had lost. But life at court changed abruptly. On the 15th of June, the new emperor Wilhelm II, her son, demanded she give up most public duties. The young Kaiser was still insecure and suspicious. He virtually forbade her from interfering with state business and even cajoled her to move away from Berlin. The Grand Imperial Mother era was over. Though she was now Empress Dowager, Victoria remained a pillar of the Hohenzollern family. Yet her circle shrank. In Kronberg she lived quietly, overseeing the castle gardens and entertaining occasional relatives. Her daughter Sophie, Queen of Greece, visited with her own children, sharing memories of childhood. Her mother, the old Queen Victoria, supported her with letters and gifts. Many of Crown Colony India's jewels ended up worn by the Empress Dowager, but her son Wilhelm II only wrote sporadically, often finding her too critical of his policies. He did take one strange step. When Empress Victoria prepared to host an English hunting party in 1899, Wilhelm secretly ordered Prussian officers to search her rooms for state papers, fearing she might slip secrets to Britain. By then, the devoted mother had already sent her private diaries and many letters back to Windsor for safekeeping, the same volumes in which she had confided, "If only my poor boy's arm had been sound, how proud I would be." Wilhelm found nothing but pet pug toy parts and tossed the matter aside. In the shadows of power, Victoria found solace in simpler things. She read voraciously, often books on art and religion, and spent hours walking in the pine forests around Kronberg. She resumed painting watercolours of her beloved English roses and kept a portrait of Queen Victoria over the fireplace as a comfort. Despite being surrounded by family, Vicky felt loneliness in her final years. The wheel of history had passed her by in many ways. One biographer wrote that she ended life as English in thought as she was German in station. Long after hearing a stray cricket at midnight, she once admitted to a friend that she still recalled British summers. By the dawn of the 20th century, Empress Dowager Victoria was ill with breast cancer. She was confined to bed at Friedrichshof and depended on morphine to sleep. Just months earlier, Queen Victoria had died, January 1901, and the cousins in Britain were now waiting anxiously for news. When Empress Victoria finally passed away, quietly on the 5th of August, 1901, she had outlived her husband by 13 years. The old Emperor William II acknowledged her death in a short telegram, and across Europe a quiet sense of an era ending spread through royal households. She once wrote, "I have loved two countries, my fatherland and my adopted one, but I cannot help wishing that both might be wiser and freer." Her life had become a testament to that wish, a British princess and German empress who bridged two worlds, championed education and charity, and above all, tried to temper the steel of empire with an English heart.